Today is June 1st, 2011. I am Jim Burch, a friend of Kenneth Maley, who we're interviewing today about the New Testament. We're in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to dedicate ourselves to this book and to talking about it. Well, I guess you know that this is going to generate controversy.
Yes.
Are you prepared for it? What do you think it'll be like?
I'm about as prepared as I can get, I think. I believe that I have delayed the publication so that I could adjust better to it. I'm not, by nature, an extrovert at all. I prefer the hermit life and to think of people at both extremes, those getting really upset with me and those thinking I'm really something special.
It's true. That's the other flip side that will occur also.
Both things are going to happen. And I guess you just take it a day at a time. I can't get a handle on what's going to happen, so.
I remember one time I had a big real estate project I was running, and the newspapers ran cartoons of me as some kind of a huckster. And the next day it passed, and the Washington Post ran a headline, "This guy did things that people have been trying to do for 30 years and no one was able to." And I got, wait a minute, it's me, the same guy. I'm as much a huckster today as I was then, and I was as good, as honest then as I am today. So what's all this about? And it's all about whatever sells, and whatever they can do, and it's extraordinarily frustrating, and you're going to be hit with it, and not something you're used to.
Right.
But I think you can handle it.
I hope so.
Okay. Now here's one that's sort of a finale for us. You told me you can sum up, or Jesus could sum up, and so the rest of us can too, the whole Christian message, the whole core message of Jesus in about 10 seconds.
Okay. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, be yourself, be your neighbor, be your God. That was given to me a number of years ago. But to put it in simpler words, you are God, God is love, and love is service. It's really simple. I mean, kindergarten kids can understand that. Everything I find important I learned in kindergarten is we could say that about Jesus' message. I think sometimes kids understand what Jesus is talking about much more than adults do, because they haven't built the boxes or set up the cells where you have to stay within this parameter to be a Christian.
Is that why, because love is service, that there's so much healing of illness and sickness in the Gospels? So much that Jesus does, and how he makes that a part of the commission to others who would go in his stead?
Yes. Interestingly, Jesus is the only major religious figure in human history that emphasized healing. And he presented it as verifying truth. If you are God and you can't heal, then you probably don't know who you are. I used to say, when I had the seminary, graduation's going to be on the island out there, and there will be no boats to get to graduation. And those who get there by walking on the water will get their diploma, and those who can't get there probably need another go-round to sense their divinity.
It's almost as if the New Testament, let's say, use the word catches on, and people make it themselves so that they then know who they are and then act like it, there will be healing, more healing going on than there is today, and that will be evidence. And not only will this be a different world because of how people feel and act toward each other then, but this healing will make this a radically different world, won't it?
Oh, I believe so. A number of years ago, I was, we were passing a hospital. I was riding with some friends, and I just said, without thinking, it's sad people don't know that we won't need this in a few years. And if people loved enough to heal enough to take care of the health problem, one of the biggies in American society would evaporate. And I really think the time has come for that. You know, Jesus said, "You can do what I have done," and he healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, helped people walk, helped people hear and talk. And as I mentioned before, there is, I'm trying to think of his name, Altar, T-A-R-R. He wrote a book in which he talks about Jesus saying to him, "I want you to raise that body." And a group of 5 or 6 people surrounded the body and prayed for hours and hours, and it went from ashen to somewhat human to having color, and finally the person got up. And I told that story to John, the bishop that I mentioned to you, and he said, "That sounds like Altar." And he had met Altar. So, you know, this isn't fiction, this is fact. Mm-hmm. There are people who are listening to Jesus saying really strong things, and they're happening. You know, when Jesus said, redo the New Testament, to me that was an impossible task. And yet, a couple of years later, it's gone to the publishers today.
Yeah. I find it so intriguing that there's so much healing in the Gospels, and it's just not spoken of today. It's not considered a churchy thing to do. It's not part of the message, not part of the requirements, because you have to know you're one with God to do it. Mm-hmm. I guess that's why.
And mainline churches don't like healing because it displays the power of the Spirit of Jesus working in us. And if the Christian sitting in the pew ever realized that they are divine, the church having so much power would just evaporate. And the problem with power evaporating means that money would evaporate. And the problem with that is then what do you do when you have this huge mortgage or these huge utility bills?
Or this array of salaries.
Yes. You know, I've traveled through Latin America, and there are thousands of church buildings there sitting empty. I remember being in one in El Castillo, Mexico, and it had been 50 years since a priest had been there. And the roof had come down in the meantime, and grass was growing. And that's the future of the big churches, I think.
Mm-hmm. Nice museums like in Europe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, in Mexico, churches are literally museums. In 1912, there was a revolution against the church, and the government took every church, every monastery, every convent. Now some of them have been returned to worship, but it's very different.
New world coming. If Jesus were sitting where you're sitting now, and we asked him if he had anything that he wanted to say to the people who are considering the New Testament, do you have any thoughts as to what he might say?
Try it, you'll like it. Read it. Don't be afraid. It's different from what you've heard, but it's not different from what I've said. There's nothing new there. It's just being presented, because it's no longer illegal to say, I am God. And Jesus would say, I was killed because I said, I am God. Trust me, you can say, I am God, and you won't be killed. And the ramifications of that are huge. And if you're not God, how can my saying in John 14:12, you will do what I do? And the next phrase, you will do greater things than I have done. It took me decades to get an answer to that. And finally, one day I asked my spirit guide, who is John, and he said, it's very simple. What you can do that Jesus could not do is publicly teach Jesus' message that we are all divine. Jesus couldn't do it. He tried and got killed for it.
So here we are. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
So, Ken, whenever anyone hears that you've spoken to Jesus, and over a long period of time, the key question, over and above all, what was he like? What was Jesus like? We read about him in the New Testament, but it doesn't tell us what he was like.
Jesus is like what you would want your best friend to be. He's very gentle, he's very soft, he's very funny, has a marvelous sense of humor. But he's also persistent. If he wants you to do something, he will. At least he got me to do something I really didn't want to do by feeding me bits at a time. I guess.
Does he laugh a lot?
He smiles a lot. I don't remember lots of times of him laughing.
No overt laughter, but just
Yeah.
a sense of joy.
Yes, yes.
Communicable, obviously.
Yes, oh, very, very much so. A tad pushy, which is restating what I've already said. Yeah.
In the Gospels, it's obvious that people wanted to be around him.
Mm-hmm.
And I always enjoyed the part where they couldn't think of anything to do. And as typical, they'll find some little teeny thing and see if they can blow it up. People do this all the time today. Blow it into some little thing, make it a big fallacy, a big faux pas. So when they didn't know what else to say about him, they say, why, he's a drunkard and a glutton because he hangs around with these people and drinks with them. So what is it about well, is it what you've already said, but that's people like to be around him? They're drawn to him?
Yes, he's a very strong personality. And so people would be attracted to that. And those who are ego-centered would be put off by that because he's God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people who don't understand what that means are offended by that, even though, as it says in Philippians, he didn't cling to his being divine. He became like us. So, and the fact that he could do miracles. I mean, when you have some, for example, when the funeral procession with the little boy goes by and he walks up and raises the child from the dead, I believe that's very literal. I know of a person in this world at this time that raised someone from the dead who was beginning to decay. So, the fact that we don't see it today isn't because it's not possible, it's because we don't believe it's possible. Mm-hmm. But if you raise a boy from the dead and give him back to his mother, that gets people's attention.
Yeah.
They want to be around someone like that.
Yeah.
In that sense, he was a movie star in the best sense. Somebody who could, and who was quite famous.
The Gospel says they were amazed at him because he spoke with authority. Can you elaborate on that? How he speaks with authority? What does that mean to you?
That he spoke the truth. That he didn't say as this person says or as that person says. He would say as God says or as Dad says. Yeah.
We are aware of his speaking of love, and we talk about that a lot. We're aware that he's come to change the old law into the new, and speak of that. But the Gospels are replete with healing, miracles, healing constantly, of which we see very little today evidence in the church and Christian people. Why? Why are we, is it our lack of faith?
Yes, but I think it's also our screwed up theology. Most churches teach us that we are sinners, that we are useless, that without Jesus' saving power we would be nobodies. And nobodies don't tend to heal people.
You're in your New Testament, not your New Testament, but this
Yes.
one of which you speak, it's true. When the apostles could do certain deeds, when they couldn't do others, it was because they had not realized their own divinity enough. Exactly. So there's gradations of it, huh?
Oh yes, yes. And there's growth in it. I've known for 20 years that I was divine, and it'll probably take me 20 more to be able to really live out of that. I've had times in my life when I've done miracles, and generally they frightened me. I remember one night I was visiting some friends, and as I was leaving, their boys were out in the swimming pool with neighbor kids, and it was raining, and they said, "Father, stop the rain." And I went, and the rain almost stopped instantaneously. And they said, "Do that again." I couldn't do that again. It frightened me, because I did it as a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll play along with it.
Yeah.
But I've had instances when those things happen, and rather than my saying this is normal because I'm divine, I think, what is going on here? I don't like.
Yeah.
At that point, at least, I didn't like joking with Jesus. Now I do it all the time, but at that point, he was still up there and I was still down here. And
does it feel better to have God a part of you rather than above you?
Oh.
I know that's a softball question, but I'm sure you'll have a good answer for that.
Well, yes. The famous Furthermore.
Uh-uh.
Who was the famous older gentleman who ran the Watergate investigation of Nixon for the Senate, I think it was.
Was it
It was a
the senator from South Carolina?
Yes.
I can see him now.
Anyway,
Respected man.
they had a recess of maybe a week or two, and he came back and he said, "Furthermore."
That's right. So here we are. Well,
Yes.
in all of this, did Jesus' personality come through?
Now there's a question for you. I never thought about that, but yes, Jesus has a wonderful sense of humor. You know, the joke that's in the introduction,
Yeah.
he told me one day, and
Did he laugh at his own joke?
I don't know that I've ever actually heard him laugh.
And yet you put the laughing Jesus on the cover for a reason, I take it.
Yes. A couple of reasons. I gave a talk at a Unity church once, and I got a standing ovation. And I sat down, I thought, this is very nice, people are very warm here. And afterwards, someone mentioned that, and I said, you know, people are very warm here, and they said, that wasn't because we're warm, it's what you said. And I said, I didn't say anything new. I talked about my spirit guide, and that's in your literature. And the lady said, it's in our literature, but we never talk about it. And the other from that, I have the sense that that's one of the most reflective paintings of his personality, because he's lighthearted, an interesting mix of very intense, very sincere, but also lighthearted. He jokes with me often, and maybe I shouldn't say this on tape. I call him a smartass quite often because of what he tells me. You know.
Does he like that? Does he laugh at your calling
yes,
that?
yes. It's not. It's a friendly, intimate kind of banter that he's really good at. You know, the famous one with Teresa of Avila. You know, when she has the buggy and the wheel comes off and she's in the mud, in the cold, putting it back on, and Jesus says to her, "This is how I treat my friends," and she says, "It's no wonder you have so few." But it was that kind, and he's very gracious. He's thanked me a number of times for doing this. Just in the best of worlds, it was a bitch to do.
Yeah.
Not only is it long and tedious, but just so many things changed in my heart and my mind. You know, to look at something that's been considered infallible, unchangeable, direct from God for 2,000 years, and to say, that's not all the truth. It's part of the truth. There are things in there that are infallible, that are unchangeable. But there are things in there that aren't, that are pure politics, an example. When I was doing Mark, I got to the point where it was in the last week of Jesus' life, and he's preaching.
Start that question over again.
Okay.
Is once Jesus saw that you were willing to do this, was there sort of an evident joy? Did he sort of express to you how important this is to him?
Recently he has. In fact, I think it was last night he thanked me for what was happening with this, because he knows we're getting to the end days of publishing the New Testament. Paul was the one who really was grateful. Paul has the most in the New Testament.
And the most mistakes.
And the most mistakes. And I mean, the women have a hatred club for him because he just was so misogynistic. The new Paul, or the real Paul, I think they will love. There's nothing negative about that. And,
how was he as a personality? Did he butt into Jesus? Or were they complementary?
oh, they were very complimentary at this point. Yeah, he's very different. I was not looking forward to working with him. When I began to read Romans, it was just, I thought, what do I do with this? Sometimes I'm confused as to his writing. And when I get that way, I get scrambled. But when we'd come across things, he just said, drop it. It's not inspired. It's my woundedness speaking and not Jesus speaking. And there are chapters that he just dropped. But the result of all of that, when you get the real core of what he had originally in there, plus what he's known since then, Paul is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's
Were Jesus and Paul together at times, and how did Jesus act toward Paul?
As I mentioned, they would sit, the four, Jesus, John, Solomon, and Paul.
Could you sort of visually see them?
Yes. Not as clear as I can with this eye, but I could see them well enough to see, I would look and see if they're there, and they always were. And, if I'd have a question, as I mentioned, I would look at them and they would. And sometimes, interestingly, they would not agree. And then we would just go out for lunch.
Like an ultimate Supreme Court sitting.
Yes, yes, because what they were doing was extremely important. And I don't think let me put it differently, I know the problem wasn't what to say, it was how to say it so the most people would be helped by it. A big difference there.
Yes.
And I hadn't clarified it till this very moment, so this is helpful.
Interesting that they would have Solomon there. Any insights as to, you said it's because of his wisdom, but was it Jesus who selected who was going to be there, or did they just automatically know that they would be there?
Never asking that question. September the 14th, Jesus asked me to do the Old Testament.
Of what year?
Of last year.
2010.
2010. And I've learned you really can't say no to him, because he's going to come at you again and again and again. You might as well just say yes.
That's going to be really tough, because he did away with the Old Testament.
Well, interestingly, I'm already halfway through it, and I'm working now on Psalms. And I mention that because Solomon is the son of David, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
And some of the Psalms are just gems of spiritual wisdom, and some of them they just kept them. I mean, there are some horrible things said in there.
Yeah.
So perhaps it was so I'd get used to him, to work with the Old Testament, because I didn't know what to do with the Old Testament.
Yeah.
What do you do with those things?
Yeah.
And it will be extremely different. They said, the one thing they said was, just drop the history. You know, it's the Jewish history, and that's fine, but although Jesus was Jewish, what he brought was significantly different than the Judaism of his day. I think the core of Judaism and the core of what Jesus teaches are the same. But during his life it was very different, and the Judaism of that day was based on the Old Testament of that day. And so there were significant problems there. I guess that's a long-winded saying. I don't know.
Did Jesus sort of, I guess using the vernacular of our day, sort of take command of this group of people, or did they defer to him? I don't mean he took command, because we knew that he would not take command, but did he seem to be the obvious leader, and did they defer to him?
No, I've never thought of that, but there were 4 of them, and there wasn't anything like that.
Huh. Do you think that's because Jesus was the truth, the full expression of the truth, but they had all become him by then, and so maybe they were equal?
I think so.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh. Just what he would have wanted.
Yes. That they become one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why
Interesting.
I said it
Most
wasn't. The word that comes to mind is politics, which I don't like. But there's some politics in writing something so radically different, because the intent is to invite people into the newness and not frighten them so much that they are afraid to walk in. And there's some politics in that, and humans as well as gods have some differences in that regard. No, the thought never came to mind, because when I would look at the 4 of them, I would say 98% of the time they would all be in agreement. And when they weren't, it wasn't about substantive things. It was about how to present it, how to walk on the least toes to get to the bridge that would bring them to this real message of Jesus.
This may be a false question, so I don't know. That is, do you think they were attempting to tell pure truth as it is, or to tell it in a way as to where people are today to bring them up? In other words, if you tell everything as it is, you may overwhelm people, and they're completely out of their comfort level and won't pay any attention to it at all. So maybe it's toned down a bit. Is there any of that you could comment on?
Yes, that happened with me. there were things, like when I was told that Moses was not at the Transfiguration, I just stopped. It was so radical to my thinking, because to me that there were some of my bones that said, the New Testament is the truth, and this is not what the original New Testament says. And yet, as I reflected on that, I used to say Jesus did two basic things. He preached and he healed. And if you read Matthew 5:10, I believe it is, where he tells his apostles what he wants them to do. Tell people that God's inside them, preach that, and also heal them. And when you heal them, they'll know that you're connected with the divine. And then I realized he did three things. He did those two things, but he also consistently broke the Mosaic law. And he seemed at times to even delight in it. Like the time in the temple when he said to the man who had the withered arm, and he said to the group, "Can I heal on the Sabbath?" And they wouldn't answer his question, and so he said, "Stick out your hand." It was like, I'm just going to do it. And the thought of Jesus and Moses together from a human standpoint, the question would be Moses saying, "What's up with this? Took me a long time to write all those laws down, and now you just dismiss them." I mean, that wouldn't happen because Moses presently is in a different state too. But having Isaiah and Elijah there, the two of them, is an extremely strong statement that Jesus is prophetic. Prophetic in the original sense of teaching that listening to God, as both of those prophets did extremely well, is what he wants in his church. He doesn't want the laws. He's not against logical laws. If we didn't have a law, we wouldn't all drive on the right-hand side. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. I've been in Africa. I drove on the left side. But beyond those organizational things that are just needed because we're in the physical, and when two physicalities get together, unless it's love, it can be a problem. So there's no sense of continuing the Mosaic law and adapting it. It's just basically, I'm different. And that's why in the New Testament, John is number one in the Gospels, for two reasons. One, he is the one closest to Jesus originally. And secondly, his Gospel begins with the statement, "In the beginning," which is symbolically saying, we're starting over, friends.
And we're presuming it's morning when they're listening to it, so it's morning in America.
It's morning somewhere.
Somewhere. Jesus told you that he'd ask, between the time he asked you and asked you again, 923 people. So would you say that when you said okay, he was happy, surprised? What was...
Relieved, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I take it then it's really important to him that this gets out. He's obviously been at it.
Oh, if you look at Christianity today, as the phrase goes, you say, is this all there is? not only the scandals and things like that, but just the day-to-day living. I told you the church I preached in, the parish council said, don't talk about Jesus. Christian church that doesn't want to talk about Jesus, something is wrong.
Yeah.
And some of the phrases as we've talked about.
So do you get any feeling about how Jesus feels about the New Testament? Now that's obviously a funny question because he's in essence telling you what to say. So has there been a progression in his thought as you've heard him telling you about this, or has he gotten more joyful, or is he now sort of settled into this reality?
The New Testament, written by Jesus and the original authors in the year 2009 and 2010, scribed by Kenneth Maley.